Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 124. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who's provided feedback, has commented on the show, who has subscribed, likes, shares. All that support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. I also want to thank our sponsors. Samson Equipment provides first-class weight rooms and has earned an exceptional reputation of providing the finest quality, design, and customer service. Being a direct manufacturer, the team at Samson brings full customization capabilities and not only branding, but in custom equipment needed to execute your next project. From racks, barbells, and plates to dumbbells, benches, flooring, storage, and much more, Samson equipment is durable and made to order from premium grade materials, all built from scratch, start to finish. Samson equipment provides professional weight room solutions for all your strength and conditioning needs. See the Samson standard for yourself and learn more at samsonequipment.com. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus is trusted by the top strength sport athletes and lifters in the world. Cerberus's wide range of products are made by athletes for athletes, truly living up to its moniker, made by the strong for the strong. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to use promo code strength_game at checkout to receive 10% off your next order at cerberusstrength.com. Also want to thank our sponsor, Sport Kilt. The kilt is a tradition dating back centuries, worn by nobles, military, and fashionistas. The kilt has been through it all, at times banned and other times celebrated. For over 25 years, Sport Kilt has been striving to perfect their version of the Scottish classic to create the ultimate garment of fashion and function. Check out the full line of kilts and join the kilt life at sportkilt.com and be sure to use promo code TSG to save on your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Rashan Chanyothi. Rashan is the assistant strength and conditioning coach at Temple University, where he oversees the training for the field hockey, crew, and gymnastics programs. In addition to his teams, he serves as the internship coordinator and as an adjunct instructor in the Kinesiology Physical Activity Program at Temple. Prior to Temple, Chanyothi was an assistant sports performance coach at Georgetown University from 2021 to 2022. Additionally, he was a full-time intern coach at Army West Point from 2020 through 2021, after spending 2019 through 2020 as a dual strength and conditioning coach and sports science graduate intern at the University of Pittsburgh. Prior to his position in college, he spent time as a personal trainer and a strength and conditioning coach in the private sector in the greater Philadelphia area. A former wrestler and a stint playing rugby at Temple, Chanyothi understood the importance and benefits of strength training for performance. He's an avid lifter himself, previously training in powerlifting and now currently competing as an 89-kilo Olympic weightlifter. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Rashan Chanyothi. What's going on, everybody? Today we've got Coach Rashan Chanyothi on the show. How you doing today, man?
I'm good, man.
Hey, I'm excited to have you on. We were chatting a little bit before. We've had a lot of kind of similar mentors, and it's a cool kind of deal to see all the like different overlaps or like different stops that we've had along the way that are very similar, just kind of in that DMV, like Philly area and everything. So this will be a good time, and I'm excited to get you on. So, hey, we'll get rolling right away. Like, how'd you actually get started in the strength game? like sports you kind of played growing up and training? Because I know now you're competing in Olympic weightlifting. So how did the inception of everything kind of start for you leading into what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of strength coaches follow the same path. We grew up playing sports. I played football, in high school, wrestling was my main sport. Also played, soccer and basketball in like the early days, earlier years. But yeah, just like through sports growing up, my athletic career, and I felt that just lifting weights kind of gave me an edge. I felt stronger, made me feel like a better athlete. So that's kind of the bug that I got for training. And then I didn't start competing in weightlifting until I got to Georgetown working under, Sean Foster and Dustin Daly. And then when I was there, I got eyes on me. So I actually got firsthand specific coaching in weightlifting. So I figured that was my opportunity to learn and just go all into the sport. And then yeah, that's now the rest is history.
Yeah, that's a good way to kind of like get started into the profession and like a good way to kind of get involved into Olympic weightlifting. Having good guys like that around, like Dustin and Sean, to actually kind of give you some immediate feedback. I think
Yeah.
that's where the barrier of entry sometimes seems a little bit harder for weightlifting because there's only so much you can watch and kind of try to repeat and everything. And when you're doing something so fast and so technical like weightlifting, you need that like immediate feedback, especially when you're like first starting out. Well, how important was that for you to kind of like pick their brain and kind of train with them on a daily basis to like really kind of like scratch that itch and get you involved in weightlifting?
Yeah, it made all the difference having that in-person coaching, and especially Sean and Dustin, because they were, Dustin still does my programming to this day. He probably wants to strangle me at times, with the amount that I complain to him, but it's great, just having that hands-on or just first-hand coaching, it really taught me the importance of like positions and technique and stuff like that, just being mindful or intentional with what I'm doing. And just yeah, it's very mentally challenging. It's obviously very physical, but very mentally challenging that I feel like nothing else really gives me. I came from a powerlifting background initially, and then kind of got stale to me, and then yeah, and then just transition to weightlifting was awesome. Having a blast with it. So uh, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of gravitate to one strength sport and maybe it's just like who they're surrounded by or just kind of their first exposure to something. And inevitably, like if you don't find like a big true passion for it, you start drifting to something else. Or maybe if you're a young coach, you kind of just get surrounded by different coaches that their philosophy is like falls into like maybe a powerlifting background and then a weightlifting background or a strongman background, whatever kind of that strength sport looks like. So you want to kind of emulate what their program looks like. But that you talked about like kind of the mental side for weightlifting, like versus powerlifting. And I'm not going to sit here and argue and say powerlifting is not mental because I know that is not the case. But like
Right.
what kind of like really was the attraction that could kind of took you away from powerlifting and then like kind of still keeps you motivated and like intrigued to like continue to pursue that as like kind of your hobby or like kind of side lifting profile?
Yeah, I would say just because weightlifting is so challenging, it's like every day is a battle. It's so technical, so you have to be all in. Like it's almost like meditation in a way. Like I have to block out everything around me, and really focus on taking this bar and put it over my head and being able to stand with it. So it just takes that much more effort and just focus into what I'm doing when I approach the bar, starting from the setup and obviously, in the catch and then finishing the lift. Yeah, again, not to say that powerlifting isn't mental, but I would say it's different in a way that it's a lot more technical and I think it just looks badass as well. So that's why I kind of gravitated towards it more. I do wish I got into it earlier, but I just never had the coaches again around me to be able to, teach me and and progress me and program for me. So, yeah,
No, that's awesome. I mean, I'm sure powerlifting probably gave you a solid kind of foundation and like basis of strengths that then like when you're starting to get into weightlifting and you have like those coaches that are proficient around you and kind of giving you the feedback and the programming you need, you don't really need to focus on strength as much as you can focus now all your attention on bar path and learning the movements and like learning all the kind of technical aspects of it versus also like picking up weightlifting as your first strength sport. And you also have to balance that with strength a little bit too. So I think
Yeah.
even though I know a lot of people would rather pick up like whatever the one they really like the most sooner, like it's the same as like probably with all our athletes. We tell them like playing multiple sports gives you like such a better foundation for when you find your one. Like you playing all those sports kind of growing up and then doing powerlifting for a little bit before you found weightlifting, I'm sure still plays a big role into like where you're at now, like in your weightlifting career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely gave me a good strength base. I've always squatted high bar anyway. So so that was like, you know, I still squat, so obviously that's a big part of weightlifting and front squatting. I tend to lean more towards front squatting now. I've gotten that bug. A lot of people probably think I'm crazy for saying that front squats are better than back squats, but I would say the biggest challenge for me, like getting into weightlifting was the snatch because with all that benching my shoulders are really pulled forward. I had tight pecs, so it took a lot of time, a lot of work to open up that chest and get more mobile in that receiving position to be able to snatch, effectively. So
Yeah, so with kind of that background and like you talked about maybe some of the tendencies of like mobility issues and stuff you had like looking into weightlifting with your background like now in weightlifting and kind of like enjoying that pursuit and getting better and better at it and having a coach yourself, like do you kind of gravitate towards that when it comes to training some of your athletes? Or are you still kind of pulling from like powerlifting roots and like even like your football and wrestling days and just kind of modge podging everything together to give your athletes like the best program possible?
I mean, it depends on the team. So again, if the team is not in here as consistently, I'm probably not gonna do any kind of Olympic variations with him. I might do some pulls or whatever, but yeah. So like I say, like a team's only coming in maybe twice a week. I don't think that's enough repetition for them to get enough practice to be proficient in the lifts. So I don't think it's you know there's more benefits in probably doing other stuff. Doing some plyos, obviously pushing strength, and we have EBT, which is nice. But yeah, it's probably better off for them, for those teams that aren't coming in as consistently, to just keep it more simple and basic. Whereas, with a team like field hockey, for example, they're in here pretty consistently. So I do a lot of Olympic variations with them, more so the clean, but first day I'm not gonna give them cleans on day one, right? I'm gonna go through a phase where we establish a good front rack. We learn how to hinge. We learn how to squat through a full range of motion. That way, we establish those positions, and then once I feel like they're ready to move on to introducing the clean, then again we'll go top down approach. Kind of very similar to how Foster does it, 'cause that's where I learned it from. So top down approach, position one, which is like power position, mid thigh, and then below knees, position two, and then we'll go from the floor if they're ready for it. But that's usually the progression if I have a team doing Olympic weightlifting movements.
Yeah, I know that progression pretty well. I know Sean has worked on that and like Alex Lee and all those guys like Dustin and everybody and has learned a lot from kind of that methodology and he's hammered that in the head forever. So I'm never going to forget all those things, but it's a good basis and it's good understanding like for any coach to realize that you're not always gonna, even if you like weightlifting or like you're proficient in the coaching elements, it's not always going to be the thing that you just add right away. There's going to be kind of progressions and regressions to it. And I like what you said too, like not adding it in just to a team that's not going to be consistent because just like anything else, especially something so technical like that, you don't want to just start teaching a team that's not going to consistently come in because there's a lot of maybe simpler things that have the same kind of payoff that you're kind of going to get more bang for your buck by I'm not going to say wasting your time teaching it, but understanding that if you only have like 1 or 2 days, it's better suited to teach like weighted plyos or any like sort of explosive like ballistic movement versus just hey we're going to do barbell drills. I mean long-term payoff weightlifting is huge, but if you're not going to get the team in all the time, then like I think that's a really good approach that you're kind of taking with that. Hey,
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. Sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. Keep going.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I mean, with a team like tennis, for example, I mean, again, I'll just do more contrast training with them, just to get that stimulus. But yeah, for teams like that, it's probably better off doing something else where that can actually get a stimulus out of it than trying to push a movement for them that they're not gonna get much out of, right? So,
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so let's kind of go back a little bit too. Like from your time like playing sports and everything, like you've been at a couple spots yourself, like currently at Temple University. Like we talk about Sean and Dustin, like obviously you spent some time at Georgetown too. And I mean, I'm always continuing to kind of grow that tree, even if I haven't been there in like 13 years. So for whatever reason, those limbs keep getting bigger and bigger. But how'd you really kind of fall into the profession? Like what was the reason for you kind of getting into coaching? Was it someone specific? Was it just wanting to stay in athletics or was that kind of your goal all along coming out of high school?
yeah, I mean, I would say like I always knew I wanted to be a coach in some capacity. But just a little backstory. So just out of college, I my first job was actually in personal training. I was doing personal training for like 2 or 3 years, and so randomly, I met Antonio Escalante, who I think was on your podcast in the past. He was there working at the time, just again, so random. But again, he's one of the smartest people I know. Currently doing his PhD at USC, and again, obviously he's been put out a ton of work out into the field, and now board of directions for the NSCA. But he really guided me on like what to do to be a strength coach. You know, he guided me on how to get certified, being more involved in NSCA, and like and just like he's to me to this day still an expert in all things strength training for sports. He's big in the strength game as well. He was a powerlifter, and obviously he's a very big advocate in Olympic weightlifting as well. And that's kind of where I got my first taste into it. But any questions I had, I knew I was able to go to him, and he had be able to answer that right away. But again, just learning from him early on really set the tone for me to really be in this field. And during that time, I was also doing private sector work. So again, working mostly with the high school and youth athletes. And then, I knew if I wanted to get into the college setting, I needed to get a master's in order to be considered for jobs. So I applied for the University of Pittsburgh Sports Science program, which was the first year of that program. Just if you look at it now, like it's come a long way. It's just from its grassroots days to now, just seeing that growth of that program is pretty amazing. Uh, but but yeah, during my time there, you're put with a team for the whole year. So I was put with men's basketball. So I worked with Gary Christopher. Awesome experience there. One of the best guys I know. Definitely a cool experience being my first collegiate setting in an ACC basketball program, which is really, really cool. And then during that time, COVID hit. So pretty much cut the last half of my semester there. So everything went online. Was still able to get my master's, present my capstone, and then after that was kind of in a limbo, not knowing what to do next. I knew I needed more experience. A lot of the schools at the time were only able to offer online internships, like virtual internships, which I knew that wasn't what I knew. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be in the flesh. I needed more hands-on experience. So came across Army West Point's internship program, which is there were the only few programs that were still allowing in-person internships. And that internship program is a whole year. So was able they were able to bring me on, was able to work under Coach Swanson. Again, he really threw me into the fire, but that is exactly what I needed. Really taught me what I needed to know, what I need to work on, my weaknesses. And then, during my time there, I also met Matt Micciarone, who was also on your podcast a couple months ago or weeks ago. But he really, took me on. I really gravitated towards him. Really taught me a lot. And around the time when my internship was about to end, uh, Georgetown had an opening for one of their part-time positions, and Matt put in a word for me. I got an interview with Coach Hill and Coach Foster. They brought me on, and I would have to say, Georgetown really set the way for me. Really, Foster and Dustin really instilled the coaching skills in me that I'm really grateful for. So and then after that, uh, Temple had a position open. So and then Coach Teague, who's the director here, used to be an intern for Georgetown way back in the day. So that's how that connection came about. And then here we are here at Temple.
Yeah, it's crazy to kind of see all those connections into, like I said, that Georgetown kind of tree is crazy. To see how everybody is kind of intertwined and connected, or kind of puts in a good word for everybody that's actually it's justifiably doing a really good job, or like shows great potential in that stuff. And I think kind of garnering all that experience from all those different stops, like yeah, like Coach Swanson at Army, like everything I've ever heard is like just detailed, like intense, and you get thrown to the wolves right away, and it's
Yeah,
sink or swim. I mean that's West Point for you for sure. And then kind of learning all the coaching attributes and everything, like being at Georgetown where you're thrust into teams right away. Like there's a lot of good things from it. And Antonio is way too smart.
yeah,
He's way too smart. He's a wealth of knowledge, and I don't know how he balances doing all the stuff he does, but it's cool that that was another connection kind of for you, and got you kind of at least on the right path to start to figure out like how to navigate college. Because I think that's sometimes the hardest part about it is when you're first starting out, and maybe coming from the private sector, or maybe coming from a university like undergrad or high school, where you don't really know the ins and outs of it, or don't maybe necessarily go into like a really quality exercise science program like in your bachelor's degree. It's hard to know like what the next step is, or kind of build your network and everything. And then you feel like you're behind when you've got programs like Pitt that are doing like sports science graduate assistant positions for like, I think it's like almost like all the teams now. It's expanded,
yeah,
and it's crazy. And then you've got all the like performance positions like West Point has, and Elon and Georgetown and Clemson. Like there's a lot of big programs that are starting to put out a lot of like quality information, and have like curriculums, and push out really successful coaches too. But if you come from a network maybe that doesn't necessarily have that, it's nice to have like a mentor, or someone even you just kind of met in passing, that points you in the right direction for sure. So definitely some good mentors on your side that kind of helped you along the way. And definitely find ways to kind of give back for sure. I
absolutely.
Yeah, I can't imagine too, like going through that point in time during COVID where you're kind of in limbo for jobs, and it's a hard point too to be in like that position where like you want to gain in hands like well on hands like experience like in person, and that's a tough spot. So kind of stepping into the tempo role, like I know you work with some interesting teams, and I know you've got a lot of experience like at all these different stops, but kind of talk about like the three teams that like you primarily work with, because I think there's such a vast difference between them. And then like, oh, maybe like an overview of like kind of how you approach it with those differences.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm really blessed with the teams I work with. They have a great training culture. Field hockey. I work with great sport coaches. They really buy into to the weight room and the training. They understand the points of it. Same thing with all my other teams. So crew. The coaches have my full trust. And they get after it. Every day it's like they're fully in. And yeah, it's like again, I'm super blessed with the teams I work with. But again, like when I first started off with them, you want to establish your standards, your expectations, and then it's important that you get them early, because if you let things slide, it's really hard to get them back. So again, when you're first starting off with a team, you want to establish your standards, your expectations, and you have to stay persistent with it too, because it's the day in and days out that really matter. And that way, you know, every day, they're giving their consistent output, and they're giving you their all in the weight room. And even though the weight room isn't their sport, let's say we're about to hit like a heavy squat, right? Um, I want them to approach that squat just like they would for, again, if they're in a shootout, right? So that we're establishing those habits that I think will carry over to their game. Um, so
How do you so like going through some of your teams like they're so different like gymnastics has like individual elements to it and I know you wrestled like growing up too like there's individual elements to that and then there's the team side of it. Field hockey is like for anybody that doesn't know is like this huge field like you're running all the time. It's a huge team sport. Crew is kind of such a large roster, but then when you start getting into like the boat and like actually like the small like teams that kind of encompass it, there's so many different kind of like factors that kind of get involved with that. How do you kind of approach like those three different teams like and like maybe the culture of that sport and still keep like that team atmosphere and like um just the work ethic and the teamwork kind of associated in the weight room, knowing that hey, a gymnast is going to go be on the high beam by themselves. Like a crew member is only going to be with like this number of people in the boat. Field hockey is only going to have a certain number on the field, but then the rest of the bench is loaded. Like, how do you still kind of keep that atmosphere alive and like in the weight room?
yeah, I mean, I coach all my teams, all my athletes the same way. Like, doesn't matter if they're on the bench, doesn't matter if they're on different, advanced for gymnastics, different seats in the boat. Everyone's going to be getting the same coaching output. I'm going to expect the same thing out of everybody. I might have people doing different things depending on, the time of year. It might have some adjustments, but they're still going to come in the weight room and still put in the work. And also I try to keep things fun as well. That'll keep the training atmosphere, fun and exciting. So we'll have crew loves the VBT, so I give them the speed. I mean, we'll use it a lot in season, but obviously it increases the intent and the output. Whoever can move the fastest for a certain amount of percentage, it gets competitive. So I same thing with field hockey. Field hockey is super competitive. We'll have an off season, some competitions and stuff like that, and out in the field, we'll have some small sided games where I make things competitive. So just adding elements of like competition and fun will kind of keep the environment, a good training environment. So
Yeah, that I think that definitely carries over to whether it be on the water, like on the field, like when you actually get to the gymnastics mats too, like having that competitive fire and like that intent in the weight room, like can only benefit them when it actually comes to their sport. You talked about like having VBT and like kind of using that within your training, and you have a background kind of sports science, like working at Pitt. How often are you kind of involving like tech and kind of like sports science elements like within your programming and like with your teams, knowing that like you probably worked with it at Pitt to the fullest extent with men's basketball? Like how when you start to kind of dial that down and you have so many other things on your plate as a coach, like maybe at practice warming them up and stuff, how do you kind of keep sports science elements manageable when you have so many other things on your plate with multiple teams too?
I just try to keep it simple. I mean, VBT is nice, I don't try to make anything too complicated, with so like yeah, VBT is very easy to use. Obviously, I just give them so depending on the time of year, depending on the time of the in season, I obviously won't implement VPT right away. Obviously, there's like things we have to establish standards, movement standards, and obviously for squatting, making sure everyone's squatting to depth and stuff like that. But when the time is right and they're ready for it, then I'll start implementing it. But yeah, just try to keep it simple. We'll do some like force velocity profiling. And it's fairly simple. Like we have Team Builder as well, so like they're able to plug in all their numbers, and it'll auto-populate on my end when I go back into the system, which is nice. So again, the fact that we have Team Builder is super nice. That way that and everyone also knows like they need to be putting in their stuff. Otherwise, I'm not gonna, I can't do much with the data I'm getting. So they understand that. Took time for them to buy in, but once they start seeing the numbers, and seeing the progress, that's when they start to really buy into it, and that just makes my like this whole sports science element easier to manage once it's all localized to one spot essentially. So
Yeah, anytime you can kind of localize it and kind of make it user friendly, especially like coach friendly too, like with all those things being tied in together, that's super helpful, especially knowing how much time that can be if you're using multiple systems, working with multiple teams. So definitely a good way to do it. Like when you talked about like the VBT and like waiting to kind of establish movement standards and quality before you actually get going, how how difficult was it like introducing maybe some athletes to the weight room, like to maybe new movements, and then as soon as that may never have actually been in a weight room before, because I'm sure that a lot of your crew was probably like that. Maybe in some of the gymnasts are the same way, maybe field hockey players too. Like how much more difficult do you think it ends up being like introducing VBT, if at all, when you're talking about like teaching new athletes, like just introducing them to the weight room? Because that can seem overwhelming. Like first, I'm in college. Second, I've never been in a weight room before. Now third, I've got to learn like how to input this in team builder, how I need to actually work on the speed of it. Like, do you ever see that like some athletes just kind of get overwhelmed with like constantly having to adapt and learn new stuff?
yeah, I could see that. Again, early on, like we take it slow. Like I don't ever rush things. I definitely want to slow cook them, meet them where they're at. So obviously just establishing movement standards. So everyone's gonna squat, hinge, push, pull, in some capacity. Making sure that they're safe. They're progressing properly. And over time, you'll again like they'll start to see the progress, and it'll start. I mean, I told them if they don't have much of an experience initially, it's going to be uncomfortable. And I understand a lot of athletes they don't like the weight room, um, but but just telling them the why behind what we're doing, and then where we eventually want to go, um, and obviously I tell them about the VBT. We might not be using it yet, but the goal is to be using it eventually, and telling them what it does, and why we're using it. That way they understand, okay, this is like kind of where we want to get to. That way they have something to kind of aim towards throughout the year. So
Yeah, it's a good point too. Like not only like teaching them the why, but also like behind what you're actually trying to implement and like maybe the progression stuff, but you're also showing them where it ultimately is going to end up going so that they can kind of maybe piece it together in their mind, even if they don't appreciate it. Like I know it happens a lot more with athletes that are almost impatient or they're coming from other programs or maybe have a higher training age, and you kind of sometimes have to just coach to the masses and like what the medium is looking like. So if more than 50% of the room needs to kind of, it's a reintroduction of like how to hinge, like it's got to be done. You can't just always break apart a team in some situations, but to be able to show them, hey, we're doing this because it's going to get us to actually pull off the floor, and then it's going to get us to be able to actually do like power cleans, and in power clean we're going to be able to do a full clean. Like you can show like the different stages of the learning process, so then they appreciate maybe the smaller, less kind of like sexy movements and stuff like that. That's really the foundation of what we're trying to do and teach.
yeah.
Hey, so with like your first, this is kind of like your first like really full-time job, like working at Temple and everything. How I know you've had a lot of experience and you probably have done a lot of things in all the other roles you've had. Like this probably doesn't feel like your first full-time job necessarily. Um, but what kind of advice or what kind of things did you kind of go into this position not feeling like you were fully prepared for? Because I think a lot of young coaches will even do their first internship or do their first graduate assistantship or whatever it ends up being and get that kind of like imposter syndrome or kind of be nervous about stepping into that new role. Like what kind of helped you prepare and like feel more confident going in that role? And then what also was maybe something that was brand new to you that you weren't necessarily like thinking was going to be part of a responsibility as a full-time coach?
I would say what was really brand new to me. Now that I'm thinking about it, now that I'm full time now, it's kind of a norm, but the amount of meetings there are with like everybody across teams you work with, so and obviously sports med, admin, your supervisor and whatnot. But again, it's kind of a norm now that now that I'm in it. But I guess like I can see how that might be surprising for like an incomer, a new full timer, right? So, but again, just understand like we're all in it for the student athlete, so, at the end of the day, we're all here to serve the student athlete and, making sure we're all on the same page. Again, us as strength coaches, we're part of their student athlete experience. We're a piece of the puzzle. There's many pieces to that puzzle. So we have to make sure that we're all on the same page, help us prepare, communicate, and collaborate to help better serve the athlete. And then I guess, if I just talking about just, I guess if I can go back and just like give myself advice, you know, coming up as an intern and part-time and now full-time, even to this day. I just try to treat every day like a job interview. I want to make sure that I'm prepared going into each session. The room looks good. I'm holding myself, professionally, and just making sure that, I'm coaching just like every day is consistent. I'm providing the same coaching output, and if anybody were to walk into the room, they would know who's leading the session. And again, first impressions are weigh a lot, so I want to make sure that whoever comes into the room for the first time sees what how I'm doing things and doing it the right way. Um, and yeah, just staying persistent with everything, and just again just treating every day like a job interview.
Yeah, that's well put. I mean, you talked about it a bunch of times too, like just how important consistency is. And as a coach, like someone that's like training themselves and like being an athlete still, like the consistency of just making sure that your training is on point and like you're focusing on all those details, and that carries over as well when you're talking about being on the flip side of that and you coaching your athletes and like holding them accountable and making sure that their effort is consistent, and just kind of how you approach the day to day, like making sure you're prepared as a coach to go into every single session like with the same kind of vigor that you had when you first started. It's sometimes that gets difficult when you get years and years down into the profession to like still have that same like motivation, but that's a great way to like kind of put it, and just making sure that you're always doing your best and you're always kind of on in that like job interview kind of mode, because that's what's going to keep you motivated, what's going to keep the athletes kind of bought into the program and really buy into what you've got going on. So definitely huge. Do you like coming in as a new coach too, like what do you think were some of the things that helped you kind of build that buy-in with the athletes? Like, was it maybe like you training, maybe you kind of just being around the teams, like just being a member of the staff a little bit more present, or what were some of the things that kind of you felt like helped maybe pick that stuff up a little bit quicker and get the athletes on board?
I think me training definitely plays a big role because again, if I'm making them do these things in the weight room, I should be doing it as well, And the same thing for the field stuff too. I mean, I've done all the runs before. I don't do it now, but I still do my sprints and whatnot. But the conditioning stuff, obviously, I don't do anymore. But I know how brutal they are. But yeah, I would say just making sure that you're keeping up your own training that keeps them, keeps your athletes bought into what you're doing, and also just making sure that you're very clear with what you expect out of them in the weight room. And then obviously once they see progress, like it's pretty easy I mean, I've done a pretty good job, I think, of getting, athletes from point A to point B. And once they see that progress, that's that's the buy-in right there. Like they love seeing that. Once they see that improvement, once they see their jump numbers go up, it's like they want to get better, right? It's like the fuel of getting better helps them I guess provides the buy-in for what I do essentially.
Yeah, I think that definitely drives a lot of athletes to want to improve, especially the ones that kind of go in a little bit timid or uncertain of the weight room, and maybe it doesn't actually get them to like enjoy it or every single day or want to come in the weight room, but it's at least rewarding to see that like the work they're putting in, like there is progress to be made. And then hopefully they start to like tie that into like their performance, like in their sport as well. How do you kind of, I know team builder and like VBT work, like you can you could definitely showcase that stuff and like have hard numbers to show athletes their progress. But are there any like other practical approaches, or like how do you kind of use those two systems to really maybe show an athlete that is maybe down on themselves, or like even showcase teams and rankings and stuff like that to keep it competitive? Like, how do you kind of use those things to make sure that progress is being like recorded and kind of reported and showcased to your athletes?
Yes, like for the jumps, like I send out the trends, like, and they understand now, like there's gonna be, good days and bad days, depending on, again, you might have had a test one day where you stayed up all night, studying, your jumps are probably gonna be lower. And then, some days you're feeling good, jumps are gonna be really high. But as long as they're seeing a trend, that way they can see where they're at. They understand, okay, like if I'm feeling a certain way today, okay, I might not have the same output as maybe the last time I did it when I had, 8 hours of sleep, had a full breakfast beforehand. So, but just showing them the trends we use that stat sport with field hockey. So I send out the table, all like the metrics and the data for each practice, for each game, and they love seeing their speeds, their high speed distance, their excels, and just the miles that they ran. They love seeing that stuff, which is awesome. So that's another buy-in thing for them. But yeah, it gets competitive for them too. Like whoever got the top speed, oh, as fast as this day. Um, and yeah, just seeing how many miles they ran makes them like feel good. Like, oh wow, I can run 6 miles, and be okay. So, um, but yeah, just sending out as much data as that as they want, and just also explaining them what each metric means, and just making sure they understand what they're looking at.
Yeah, that's awesome to be able to kind of like showcase that stuff and then make sure that you kind of report it and then let them know like what it is. Because if they're interested in it and you're able to kind of show them those things versus just kind of tell them all the time, I think that definitely solidifies what you're talking about. You've got three sports that are kind of notorious for like different types of like high volume. Like you just said it there, like with field hockey using that like stat sport and actually them being interested in how many miles they cover. And it's sometimes staggering how much they cover and then being bent over in that position to play. That's
Yeah.
that's a difficult task to do. And then just with crew, like and the repetitive, like cyclic motion of just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then gymnastics just being like long kind of grueling practices and most of those athletes have been probably started since they were like 5, so they're like their training age from gymnastics is probably through the roof by the time
Oh
they
yeah.
come to college versus some other people that might not have picked up their sport until middle school or high school. So how do you kind of address maybe either with the athletes or the sport coaches or within your own like programming just an account for like the high volume and the different kind of volume that you're getting in those three sports? Because that definitely has to make you make adjustments in the weight room or kind of tailor your conversations with those players, knowing that when they go out to practice, they're either logging a lot of miles, a lot of time on the water, or a lot of like high impact, like actual whatever you want to call gymnastics practice.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just try to give them, like, especially in season with all, like, obviously gymnastics, they're taking a beating. Crew, yeah, very taking a beat. Like field hockey as well, with the amount of miles that they're running. I just try to give them the minimum effective dose. Just try to keep them healthy in season, and that's what the VBT is also really useful for me because it forms or it allows for auto regulation. So, you know, it allows us to adjust the training, adjust the load, give them speed, to where they can hit, try to hit, and it'll kind of hold them back if they're not feeling so great. But just using the VBT in season to help us kind of adjust the training loads, and then uh, just giving them minimum effective dose in season. Yeah, again, I'm not trying to take away from their game. I'm trying to, so, like, help them stay healthy in season, help them stay strong, so that they can perform uh, out in the field, out in the water, or out in the gym. So
Yeah, that's a great way to kind of do it too. Just just trying to find whatever that like minimum effective dose is and just complement everything that they're doing because a lot of times it's overfilling their bucket and they're overstressed them. So you got to find like the perfect opportunities to kind of just put the right dosage on it and make sure that whatever you're doing in the weight room is complementing what they're doing and best preparing them for whatever their sport is, because that's what they really care about the most.
Yeah.
Hey, so kind of with your own training, like, is there anything on the horizon that you're kind of getting ready and gearing up for, or have you kind of started to drift a little bit and help other people like within the facility as well, kind of tailor their weightlifting, or are you just always Dustin's protege right now?
I would say I'm Dustin's protege. I mean, a lot of us have a weightlifting background as well. We all have our own kind of programs that we're doing. But yeah, I mean, right now I haven't competed in a year. I'm trying to get back on the platform, so I definitely need to get my weight down a little bit. But this year has been pretty tough just with the schedule change. And so like this year, I'm looking to get back on the platform at some point because yeah, I do want to get back. It's fun to be competing and training for something. And my goal is to try to make it to the American Open series this coming year. So
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely a lofty goal. That would be a fun thing to do. With your experience though, like from wrestling and everything too, like you're used to weight cuts and kind of like figuring out how to manipulate your body weight leading into a match and now we kind of leading into like weightlifting competitions. Like how much are you kind of letting that body weight usually fluctuate? And is it a little bit different like cutting weight for weightlifting versus cutting weight for wrestling, like now with your own experience?
I mean, I kind of keep it the same. I try to keep my weight like no more than 10 pounds over where I usually compete at. Right now, I'm like 15 pounds. So yeah, I mean, I know I know what I need to do. Yeah, I've done it plenty of times. It was, wrestling was my life at one point, so there is a way of doing it correctly. I've done it the wrong way, in the past where I had to cut 20 pounds in 3 days. But yeah, it's just now that I'm more educated, I would say I know the proper way of doing it. To where I'm not losing as much strength, or obviously you want to keep as much strength as possible. When you're cutting weight, there is going to be some reduction in your strength. But you try to limit that as much as possible by cutting the weight correctly and effectively. So.
Is there like any difference you kind of see from cutting weight for like those two sports, like just based off your experience, like, or is it really just kind of weight is weight? Because I mean, you're using strength in a different manner because wrestling, you're going to wrestle against someone else like same body weight, and weightlifting, you have to manipulate whatever the weight you choose on the bar. Um,
Yeah.
so like you still have to have different components of strength and like whatever you're trying to edge out and get the best kind of weight cut for it. And it's the same as like minimum effective dose. You're trying to find that perfect bit to get right on the scale and then get back up and be replenished and kind of recharged and rejuvenated to perform at your best. Is there a difference how you approach the cut, or is it just kind of based off experience you get better and weightlifting or wrestling is the same kind of method?
Again, I try to keep it kind of the same. I mean, it's just weight cutting to me is just the same things. I just need to be in a deficit. I need to prioritize protein, make sure I'm staying hydrated and stuff. But I would say the biggest challenge is weightlifting. It's so quick. You approach the bar, it probably won't last more than 5 seconds. Whereas in wrestling, I have to wrestle 3 periods. So the weight cutting for wrestling definitely took more of a toll on my performance than I think in weightlifting. As far as performance goes, because there are times when I would step out onto the mat and just be just run down. Whereas in weightlifting, I wouldn't be as run down, but I was still able to kind of, have some output, lifting that bar. So
Yeah, with it, like you have some sports that they don't necessarily like kind of look at like the weight on the scale necessarily, or it's not like a rule that's built into what they're doing. like competition wise, but like the weight in a boat for crew and like especially coxswains, like that's important, even though there's not really, I don't think there's a rule against like the body weight that's in it. Gymnastics is kind of the same way, like it's relative body strength, the same as wrestling, except it doesn't matter what your weight is for gymnastics versus wrestling. You have to be in those weight classes. And field hockey is just notorious for like the miles we talked about, logging that stuff. So like nutrition plays a big factor. Knowing that, like, I don't know how much your athletes know about like your competitive background and like being able to manipulate your weight and going through those weight cuts, but has that ever come up like with those sports and like them kind of using you as a resource for sports nutrition? Or how do you kind of, if those conversations come up, do you like drift the conversation or point them to someone else if you're not the one kind of leading that conversation?
Yeah, I'll point them to someone else. Well, we have a sports nutritionist, so we're really lucky to have her. But yeah, all nutrition stuff will go. If they ask me about something, I'll just refer them to her. But I mean, I'll just give them like just basic stuff that I think all of us should know. Making sure that we're staying hydrated, we're fueling yourself properly. Um, I try to stay away from the whole weight stuff. That's not really my pay grade, so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole either. So that's like stuff that they need to talk to the nutrition about. But I just try to educate them on good, diet and sleep habits as well, and then nutrition or hydration habits as well. So yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I always wonder too, because I've had conversations with like maybe sports nutritionists, and it's the same as a strength coach or an athletic trainer. Like you're not going to be able to have played every single sport. You're not going to be able to be as knowledgeable in every sport, especially ones that you maybe didn't grow up or have any experience playing or coaching. So a lot of times athletes will gravitate to someone that's already gone through that experience. And if like a nutritionist hasn't really dealt with weight cuts before or really understand like that like side of like hydration manipulation and all that stuff, they want to gravitate to someone that like does it still. And that's what my wrestlers would always do that with me, and they would come talk to me because they know I've done like water cuts, and I would hear their horror stories and be like, definitely don't do it that way. But
Yeah.
they just kind of want to know from someone that still kind of lives and breathes in it. And I didn't know if they would do that for you because you're still kind of competing and you've gone through that experience yourself.
I mean, yeah, I mean, our sport, I mean, it's not like it's the gymnastics still, I mean, the gymnastics crew and field hockey, they're not confined to a weight class. I just try, I mean, I mean, with wrestling, it's a different story because like they have to be on weight for their matches and stuff. But for them, I just try to make sure they're building up high relative strength, and just staying strong in season, and just make sure they're fueling themselves properly and hydrating and recovering well. So
Yeah, that education piece is important, and just kind of harping on the basics, the same as we talked about, like for actual training and like the foundations of what you're doing in the weight room, like the foundations of nutrition and kind of the hydration point, like can't be said enough. So when it comes to like education for yourself, where are your kind of resources, or like where do you kind of go to like stay in the know for some of these things? And we talked about some of your mentors, but where do you kind of go for additional information, and like what are you kind of listening to and building on your kind of brand yourself?
yeah, I mean, like there's so many things out there now, like a lot of Simply Faster articles. I mean, Team Builder has a ton of stuff they put out. Same thing with Catapult and you know like Pitt, like all these different social media handles. Like Pitt is putting out a ton of stuff as well. But yeah, I mean, I had this conversation with Coach TV, my boss, about getting certain certifications, and he uh he mentioned like, have you ever asked Coach Steenrod about this and that? Because our staff is pretty knowledgeable. Coach Steenrod has a very big background in speed work and sports science, GPS. So he said, yeah, pick his brain out because like he's done it for a long time. He has experience and a lot of success working with the catapult and programming speed stuff. And so but yeah, just talking shop with our staff here, and also just you know, luckily enough that we have a budget to go to different conferences and seminars throughout the year. So we all go to the CSCC every year. There's also still money in the budget to allow us to get any certification that we're interested in. So we're lucky to have that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's big too. Like a lot of times people are looking at some of those certifications and they have kind of their place within like continuing education and like development as a coach, but you utilizing the resources and the other people around you or like in your surrounding area, like we've had a lot of guys from Temple on before, and like the Philly area is ridiculous when it comes to how many like the pocket of just the coaches and like private sector facilities and professional sports and everything around there. So, and then just like even in your own backyard, just in Temple, there's so many other coaches there that you can kind of pick their brain for and bounce ideas off of. So that's definitely the first place to kind of look. And it's awesome to have such a knowledgeable like and willing to share staff around you and being able to go out and watch them. I'm sure that that kind of scratches the itch and solves a lot of the questions you've already got going on.
Yeah.
Hey, so like any good session, we got to end the show and we end it with a finisher. So I got four quarters for you, four questions, and then overtime at the end. So you can go rapid fire and keep it to like a weightlifting under 5 seconds sort of lift, or you could take your time and grind it out like powerlifting on any questions. But you ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Hey, first one I got for you. Biggest influence in the strength and conditioning profession and favorite weightlifter right now.
Ooh. Biggest influence probably has to be Sean Foster and Dustin Daly. Again, they really set the way for me, really instilled, you know, all these, really instilled the qualities of being a good coach into me. And I try to model myself after them. So yeah, and I would say favorite weightlifter right now. He's young. He's definitely a stud, John Morrow. Out of 1440. A little shout out to him, but he was one of my interns last year. So, but yeah, he just competed at the senior nationals. I forgot how he did, but he's always he no one's he's a dog. No one trains like him. But yeah, he's one of my favorite weightlifter right now. Same thing with Abby Cooper as well too. Abby Cooper.
Okay. Hey,
Yeah.
so when you're not coaching, you're not kind of gearing up for a competition. What are you kind of doing as hobbies outside the weight room walls?
So this might be a surprise to a lot of people, but I'm a big gamer. Actually, I game with Dustin from time to time. So yeah, it's kind of a gamer. But I do like to spend time with my friends and family, going out to eat and going to different breweries around the city. So yeah,
Not a bad way to spend your time. Hey, so if you weren't coaching, what do you think you might be doing as a profession right now?
that's a good question. Man, I don't know. I'd probably say being involved in the military in some capacity. Yeah, that's probably my answer.
All right, I'll take
Yeah.
that. Hey,
Yeah.
so if you get to pick the music, like it's a temple stap lift or no one else is in the room, like what are you putting on the radio if it's your choice? And what is going to be like your hands down best post-training meal after that lift?
I would say can't go wrong with like Five Finger Death Punch radio. I definitely need that hard rock for my lifts. My post-training meal, probably sushi. Sushi is usually my go-to. So yeah.
You got a specific roll that's like your go-to or like the one you order the most of?
I mean, I usually go like, can't go wrong with the salmon avocado roll, but every place has their own like special rolls, so like I'll explore those rolls as well. But yeah.
All right, well, I know you're in Philly, so most importantly, do you like cream cheese on your rolls or no?
I usually don't do the cream cheese on a roll, but I do like cream cheese on a bagel. But yeah, usually not on a roll.
Yeah, it belongs on bagels, not in sushi. I can't think of a roll that I really like that has cream cheese in it. So sorry for
Yeah.
anybody that really likes that. So hey, last one I got for you for overtime. What is kind of your favorite part of the coaching profession? And then like, what's your favorite part of being able to like get on the platform and compete?
Favorite part of the profession, I guess, just being around all these, highly motivated athletes, being a part of something bigger than, than me. So, just helping them. Nothing makes me more happy than you know, seeing like that they're seeing progress and all the work that they're putting in is paying off. And yeah, and again, I kind of live vicariously through them and their sport. I love cheering them on the sideline. But yeah, just living vicariously through them, and just being there to serve them is what makes it so rewarding for me. Um, and then what was the second part of that question? Sorry.
What about for you for like your favorite part of like getting on the platform? Like when athletes you get to watch them and do it. What about when it's your time to get on?
Yeah, I mean, again, weightlifting or just training in general kind of it just fuels my passion. It really drives, it just makes me love what I do. It keeps me competitive. I'm a very competitive person, so it gives me direction, gives me drive to, compete and be better, right? So like every day I'm trying to get better. Every day I'm trying to battle, essentially every day. So but yeah, just trying to get better. Feeling my passion with the weightlifting, it provides me that itch that I need. So
No, that's awesome. It's cool to kind of see it too, because we talk about like the how coaching and training and everything kind of like intertwines, and you being able to train like kind of being one of your hobbies and just fires you up to kind of get back out there and coach. So being able to kind of pull those things from your own training and like talking to your mentors and then get on the platform and train each day and then go compete, like that fires you up to be a coach. And that's a huge part of why like I still continue to train. And I know a lot of coaches, like even if they're not getting on the platform, they're finding different goals and different ways to make sure that they're still motivated and excited to go into work because they're still kind of working on themselves in their own training. So that definitely a cool thing. You fired me up to kind of go train later today. So that'll be good, man. Hey, so I appreciate you coming on today. For anybody that's got any questions for you, kind of want to follow along or see when you got your next competition lined up, where can they get a hold of you?
yeah, so my Instagram is probably the easiest. It's just Rash Strength, Rash, and then Strength. I don't have a Twitter, but yeah, Instagram is probably the best way of reaching me. And then my email, just my first dot last name at temple.edu. So
Awesome, man. We'll link everything in there, and hopefully once you get something lined up for the next year and start gearing up for the AO, we'll make sure that we're following along. So I appreciate you coming on today, man. It was great talking to you.
yeah, thanks for having me again. Full circle moment for me. I've been listening to your podcast for, since I got into the field. So yeah, this is very special to me. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, it's awesome to get you on. Appreciate you listening. It's definitely cool to get some listeners on and get some people that like appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody that listens. So to have a fellow coach on that's been at all the places and has a lot of the same mentors as me, it's a full circle moment for myself as well. So thanks again, man, for coming on and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, man.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.